Hey everyone, it's Dr. Dan Ritchie, president of the Functional Aging Institute. And some of you are in here early, just listening to Jeff and I chat. So it's a real honor to have Jeff Weiss on today with Age of Majority. And Jeff, I'm going to let you kind of tell us the story of Age of Majority. But just so everyone knows, at FAI, we're always looking really for the next company, the next big thinker, and really the next person who's focused on active aging, focused on marketing to people in the older demographic, and people that are experts in this area that are saying, hey, the vast majority of the market is missing it completely, right? I mean, we're really not doing a good job marketing to people over 50. And so when Cody reached out to Jeff and he was willing to do a keynote at the Functional Aging Summit in Albuquerque, we were really excited. And of course, the next thing we said was we got to get this guy on a webinar as fast as possible so all of you can meet him. And you're going to all have opportunities to ask questions today. We've got 50 people on live right now, Jeff, so that's awesome. And as soon as you're ready, we'll have them start typing questions in. But I always like to start with, hey, where's everybody from? So if you're from Canada, give Jeff a shout out. He's sitting in Toronto today. But wherever you are in the world, I would love to see that. So type that either into the chat or the Q&A, just so I have an idea. Usually we have several countries represented, and that's awesome. Shows that FAI is spreading around the world. So Jeff, why don't you tell us to start, just tell us a little bit about the history of Age of Majority. Probably need to tell our listeners what the heck is Age of Majority. When and why did you launch this business, and what is it? What does it do?
All right, thank you, and great to be here. Welcome, everyone. It's actually not as cold here as some people probably think it is, but it's beautiful. Age of Majority, we've only been in business now for just over a year, but I've been running another business called Harbinger, which is a marketing communications business. We launch a lot of brands, and we also had a lot of focus on marketing to women, which was part of the reasons why we started Age of Majority. So Age of Majority, if I have to think way back, its roots go back to 1991 when I was doing my MBA, and I had to do a paper, almost a thesis. And a friend of mine reminded me my thesis was on marketing to seniors and the opportunities around that. And lo and behold, it's come into effect. So with Harbinger, my other agency, we started to notice, or we noticed for a long time, a couple things. One, talking to clients, they're all talking about we're focused on moms, or the soccer moms, all that. There was never anything, either a creative brief, a media brief, research brief, that was over anyone over 55. So we thought that was interesting. And then, we started to delve into the numbers, and the numbers have been there for a long time, but really clearly show, and we knew from our work with marketing to women, understanding life stages, that the power, influence, the money is with older consumers. So we started to kind of delve into it more and started to have conversations with clients and clearly understood and validated that there's a huge opportunity with what we call Active Agers. That I can explain what that means to us. But it became clear as a huge opportunity. So we started Age Majority a year ago, October, and we're basically a strategic consulting business. We do some implementation, but it's really about identifying and exploiting opportunities with active aging consumers. So that's what we're about.
Okay, cool. So I hear people use the term active aging a lot. So what do you differentiate an active ager versus, like, we use the term baby boomer a lot here in the United States. So what do you mean by that? How are they different from boomers?
Well, boomers, so we hear that a lot, and one of the things I can talk about later is just there's no real good name for calling this group of consumers and there's some downsides of trying to do that. But boomers is what we hear more often. Boomers are basically born between 1946 and 1964, so it's an 18-year gap. I'm actually the last of the boomers. I turned 55 in 3 months, so we're actually going to do a countdown on Age of Majority in terms of what that looks like and have some fun. But you think about an 18-year difference in age, and you can look at any generation, Gen X, millennials. My son who's 22 is on the bottom end of the younger end of the millennials. The reality is my father could be a boomer, the 18-year difference. So there's so many differences within that 18 years, that 18-year span, and even people who are older than the boomers, the only thing that really defines them all together is their age, and that's it. There's so many distinctions. So we kind of had to dissect that, and there's there's how many, 82 million boomers in the US and Canada and North America. So we kind of said, we have to dissect those. So we came up with the term active aging consumers, and we did some research with one of the universities here, and we said we want to understand them better. So basically we interviewed people over 55 years of age, and we came up with 3 different core segments of that group, and 2 to 3 really comprise our what we call the active aging consumer. But I'll start with the 25% who don't fit in, and we call them the traditionalists. And when you think about all the stereotypes that people and marketers, society uses, a lot of the stereotypes are really around that 25% who are traditionalists. They're the ones who are less active, they have less money, they're less outgoing, all that stuff. Yet that's what kind of society focuses on, because that's the way that a lot of older people used to be, but things have changed. So that leaves the other 75%. There's 2 different groups that compromise that. There's one group called the explorers, and those are the people that just want to try new things, live life to the fullest, do all that great stuff. They make up about half of that 3/4. And then the other half of that, so 35 to 40%, we call the wellness seekers. And those people also want to live life to the fullest, but they're really all about kind of health, wellness, all that kind of stuff. Maybe not as adventurous and exploring as the other group, but that's how we define the active aging consumers. So they're mentally, physically, and socially much more active than the other group that most people think of. And one of the key differences between active agers and the other 25% are active agers. Almost 3/4 of them are exercising on a regular basis. That's one of the key things that distinguishes them versus boomers. So we try to stay away from that word boomers as much as possible.
Okay, great. So Cody and I have had some theories on this for quite a while, and I'm eager to hear yours. Why do you think this group of consumers is so often ignored by businesses and marketers? And I mean, you can give us some examples even in the fitness realm, but I think across the whole spectrum of businesses, they tend to be overlooked or ignored. Why do you think that is?
Good question. There's a bunch of reasons. And when we launched actually over a year ago, we did research with both consumers and marketers in the US to try to get a sense of why that was happening. And there's a couple of reasons I'll highlight. Firstly, when you ask marketers and businesses to give you what they think the size of the opportunity is, there's a huge discrepancy between what they think and what reality is. So we asked them between millennials, Gen Xers, and the boomers, the over 55, we said, what percentage of consumer spending do you think each group does? And keep in mind who is answering this, and I'll talk about that in a minute, but this group of marketers estimated that the millennials account for almost 40% of all consumer spending. That's more than double. They only account for 18% of consumer spending. I know firsthand, given my son is still coming to me for money all the time. Coming from Orlando. He's working in Orlando now. So, the thought, and then along with that, is that they then underestimate how much Gen X and the over 55s are spending. So that's one of the key things. There's this belief that there's a lot more money being controlled by younger consumers than there actually is. So that's the first thing. Secondly, there's this huge fixation on millennials, and this is kind of the big beef. One of the real reasons we started Aging Majority is to really crush the myths and stigmas and stereotypes around aging consumers. And our big thing is that if you're focused so much on millennials, you're missing the boat. And when you look at most marketers, depending on what numbers you look at, the vast majority of marketers are under 40 years of age. Yeah, so our office here, our average age is probably 30 or so. And it's like, oh, do you want to get involved in, Aging Majority? It's like, I don't want to be marketing to my grandparents. So there's this whole, and a lot of it's, again, related to the stigmas and beliefs and stereotypes that are out there. And it's just in society, we hear it all the time. And so those to me are the 2 big reasons that businesses are totally underestimating. They just don't know what they don't know, which for me as a marketer by training, the first thing you got to know is who your consumer is. And they don't have a clue, or they're just refusing to acknowledge that. And I saw an interesting quote the other day. It used to be, I never got fired for hiring IBM. And now it's, I never got fired for targeting millennials. So there's all these myths and everything that tie into it. But those are the 2 key things. You've got young business people making decisions based on what they think is real, and the reality doesn't match what the in terms of where the money is versus the perception.
Yeah, I see that a lot in our industry. In fact, I see it on our Facebook wall from time to time, right? People will say, well, yeah, but look at the gyms. Everybody in the gym is in their 20s and 30s. I'm always like, well, yeah, but the gym is catering to those people. So, of course, they're not going to have as many older consumers. So,
yeah.
So I know your mission, and one of the reasons, Cody, and I wanted to have you speak at our summit, your mission is to crush myths and stereotypes associated with aging. Can you tell us some of the common myths that are out there, and maybe we can jump right into some of your dirty dozen myths?
Sure. Let me talk about maybe 3 of them that I think are kind of more general. The first one, we've given them all names. The first one is called 1 foot in the grave. And that's really the belief or myth that getting older is really depressing because there's nothing to live for, right? And, because again, people used to live in, the cycle of life was, your first 20 years, you kind of grew up, you went to school. The next chunk of time, you started working, you had a family. And then the last chunk, you retired and you basically waited around to die. That's kind of in general, right? It's no longer like that. But the belief is that, oh yeah, when you get older, you're more depressed, right? And again, you see a lot of visuals of people that are just sad. And again, they're more the traditionalists. So when you look at all the research, it's really, and you think about, they call it the happiness curve, right? It's like a U curve. And the reality is that you're happy when you're really young because you're naive, you don't know any better. You're most, depressed when you're, kind of, I can't remember, it's like in your mid to late 40s. But as you get older, actually adults 65 to 79 are the happiest. And there's a bunch of reasons for that. I won't get into, but in general, but it's just, you don't have the stress, you don't have the worries, you don't worry about stuff the way that you used to, you don't have the family issues as much. So this belief that you get depressed as you get older is actually the exact opposite. So that's the first one. Second one is what we call what's a Bluetooth. This myth we see all the time, and it's a belief that active agers are technologically averse and challenged. And again, that's just not true. And all you have to do is walk around. I'm sure a lot of folks who are in the fitness clubs, you can clearly see that. And that's both in terms of the products that people are using. You look at the what do they call them, the speakers, the voice technology is growing like crazy in terms of speakers at home, that whole market. So we're seeing products that maybe the active agers aren't the initial early adopters of them, but in terms of where the growth is coming, it's huge. And then in terms of the services and apps and all that kind of stuff being employed, again, they're the ones that are driving the market. So, but it's a belief, it's like, oh no, I can't target them through non-traditional means because they're not using their smartphones and all that kind of stuff. The third one, which kind of encompasses a lot of things, is what we call oh to be young again. And that's this belief or myth that people want to stay, they want to look, they want to be as young for as long as possible. And I think that used to be the way. And for sure, there's still some people who kind of do that. But there's been a real shift, and it's almost a reverse aspiration that we're seeing. So firstly, active agers now, it's like I want to look and feel and be as best as I can, no matter what my age is. It's not about me trying to dress hipper to look younger. I want to dress so that I feel good and I look good for whatever age I am. So that's the first thing. But secondly, we're seeing a bit of a reverse aspiration. We've seen this in some of the client work that we're doing where people now, kind of particularly in their 40s, they look at their parents, they look at grandparents, they look at older people they know, and some of them who aren't that mobile or are active, they're saying, I don't want to be like that. Or they're looking at people who are active and enjoying life, and they say, I want to be like that. So now they're doing things and they're aspiring to be that way when they get older. So again, we're seeing a bit of a reverse. So the 3, 1 foot in the grave, what's a Bluetooth, and oh to be young again are kind of 3 that are general myths and stereotypes that are out there.
Yeah, I love that. Well, I'm in my 40s, so I got 20 years to get happier. So, but I honestly, Cody and I talk about that J curve of happiness quite a bit, and I think we are living it, right, and experiencing it, right. I mean, you get enough teenagers in your house, and puts your happiness curve to the test. There's no doubt.
Yeah.
So,
oh yeah.
And I love, and we both happen to have a lot of children. So, and I love my children, but I can see a day where all my kids are out of the house, and man, my grandkids are going to be probably a much greater joy. So I can definitely see the reality of that. So,
we hear.
So, of your dirty dozen myths, what would you say is most applicable for our listeners, our members, when it comes to training older adults? When we think about fitness training and just how health and wellness fits in for these older clients.
Yeah, good question. I think there's probably a lot of them apply to kind of your members, but the two that stand out the most, one we call "I've fallen and I can't get up," and that myth, probably everyone on here has kind of seen that ad from Lifeline that was done, I don't know how many years ago, probably 30 years ago, whatever, has done more to harm the perception of older consumers than anything else, right? But it's the belief that active agers are physically inactive, they're frail, or they're weak. And, obviously your business is based on that not being the case. Right. And everyone, myself, everyone there, obviously, you're in the business of training older consumers. So, I play a lot of tennis, and a couple weeks over the holidays, I played with a guy who's 96 years old.
Wow.
Who just won the national men's double championships in the U.S. And he said it used to just be that you showed up and you would win because everyone else was kind of dying at that age. But there were 4 teams that participated this year. Anyway, we've all got examples, but the reality is that active agers are not frail, they're not immobile, they're not inactive. And I said 3/4 of them are working out all the time. So that to me is a big, big myth. And that has implications we can talk to in terms of some of the practical things to consider. The other one, the other myth I talk about is kind of you can't teach an old dog new tricks. So that's the myth or belief that people are stuck in their ways as they get older. They don't want to try new things, and they're loyal to brands. We hear that all the time from people. It's like, oh no, I don't want to target this group because once they've tried something, they're going to use it their whole lives. And also thinking that if I target a younger group of millennial, if I get them now, they're going to keep using me forever. And we know kind of that's not true at all. And all you have to look at technology and social platforms to know how easily those things can come and go. So we know that active agers want to try new things, right? They're like, they don't have as many inhibitions anymore. They want to try new things. So just implications in terms of going out there and asking what they want to try or presenting new things for them to try, not believing that just because they're older, they don't want to try new things. It doesn't mean it's not necessarily going to be scary to try new things, but it's like, hey, let's give it a go. If it works, great. If not, I tried it. Let's move on to something else. So those are the two that really kind of fit in for me.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. And I tell people all the time that the thing you're underestimating is how long these clients are going to live. Right.
Exactly.
I mean, I used to get people say, but aren't your clients going to die? I'm like, well, if you take on a client at 72, you're probably going to have them for 10 years. They're not going to die for a long time, So this,
exactly, right?
This myth that like, well, why would I want to get clients in their 80s because they're just going to die on me? It's not very likely. They're gonna be clients for a long, long time. So, in fact, most of the clients we sign up in their 80s, they stay with us an average of 5 to 6 years, right? I usually say the reverse is true. You won't be able to get rid of them, right? So they'll keep training with you. So
and one of the things, just following up on that, we hear about in terms of marketers making excuses for not targeting older consumers is. They say, the lifetime value is a lot higher for a younger consumer than it is an older one. And if you can get them and hang on to them for a long time, great. If they can keep spending money, great. But I think what we're seeing in a lot of categories is older consumers, you're going to have them for actually longer periods of time, and they're going to spend more money with you. So just a very different mindset than what we're used to seeing.
Yeah, definitely. So from the trends you're seeing among older adults, do you think there's some fitness-related interests or activities, that really our audience should be thinking about tapping into, or maybe even creating programs to support?
Yeah, I think so. And again, if you follow the money, it's clear to see that it's the active aging consumers who are spending the money. And, you're just looking at different areas, different categories where we're seeing a lot of growth, interesting growth. Travel in general, but adventure travel is one that's definitely up there, and people going on, trips where exercise and wellness are huge parts of that. So that's definitely key. We're seeing a lot of growth in activities, whether it be biking, e-bikes are growing, in huge numbers. I don't know if any of your members are offering that. Obviously spinning as people prepare for, I went on my first bike trip a couple of years ago and it almost killed me. But there's a lot of preparation, and I know bike sales are being driven by active aging consumers. A lot of people getting into triathlons and things like that. Pickleball for those people who don't, want to have a little less exertion. So activities like that. And then we're seeing big growth with all consumers, but again, particularly with the older active aging consumer in the food side with natural, organic, and healthy food. Huge growth opportunities there. We've done some interesting work with some protein-based brands. One of them in particular that fights sarcopenia, which I don't know if you know what that is, but basically it's the next osteoporosis where, you start losing muscle mass at the age of 40, right?
Yep,
and
yep.
So active aging consumers are, again, they want to stay as active and healthy as they can for as long as they can. So looking for foods and supplements and products that can help them kind of live longer. Wearable technology and clothing. Again, we're seeing huge growth, and there's the CES show in Vegas this year. I couldn't make it, but I'm sure there's a ton of stuff out there in terms of wearable technology, watches, and all that kind of stuff, which are very applicable to the Active Agers and to your members' clients. Some of the key areas. So I think you really have to play up to the aspirations of the active aging consumer. So again, thinking they want to be, they want to. What the phrase that I heard is the morbidity. I can't remember. It's the morbidity. I can't remember what it's called, but it's basically shortening the time.
Compression of morbidity.
Yeah. So they want to have that time between they can't do anything and they die. They want to shorten that out as much as possible. So anything that the trainers can do to help people live that goal is going to work, right? So
the goal is to live to 100, completely independent and function, go to bed, and
exactly right.
Go die in your sleep, right? So we have a 86. She might be 87 now. And she's brought in a wearable technology years ago, right? I think when the Apple Watch came out, she was like the first one to get it, right? So it was seriously like, Joyce, you're in line to get the Apple Watch, and she uses the fitness technology on it, right? She's like, it tells me when I need to get up. I haven't moved in an hour and all this stuff. And she's in training 4 days a week, and she's still, watch tells me I got to get up and move, so she's still using it. And here's someone who's, 15 years older than a baby boomer, right? I mean, she's 87 years old and embracing technology.
Yeah. The other thing I'll add, and I'm not sure how much it comes into play with your industry, but I think consider also appealing to the children and of these active aging consumers who, again, they want to see their parents being, as healthy as possible. And that whole caregiver area is kind of a really interesting space. So anything you can do so that, if they can support what their parents are doing, there might be some possibilities there for some of your members to think about what they might be able to do against those consumers as well.
Yeah. So you mentioned pickleball. I gotta ask, are you an active pickleball player yourself?
I'm an active tennis player.
You mentioned that.
Tennis, and in the Northeast, where I spend a lot of time, they're into paddle or platform tennis.
Okay.
And then pickleball, if I'm down in Florida, where it's becoming a lot more popular in a lot of the resort areas, whether Arizona, Florida, they're converting, spaces, whether it be, some golf holes into pickleball or converting other spaces into pickleball.
Pickleball is exploding here in Indiana. It's just taken off here in West Lafayette. I can't believe it. And it's so funny because people come in. We actually are training clients now because they were like, I can't play pickleball very well because I can't move, right? I don't have the lateral agility. And I'm like, well, we can definitely help you with that. And of course, they think I won't know what pickleball is, right? And I'm like, actually, I played pickleball in high school, right? I can't believe it. But fortunately, in Illinois, where we're required to have physical activity every day all through high school, we had an entire quarter committed to pickleball, which was great. So I actually know the sport, love the sport. And I've seen people recently flying with their paddles on airplanes, right? Going to tournaments. I'm like, wow, this thing has really taken off. So pickleball is here to stay. And
I haven't seen any numbers, but maybe, I haven't seen any numbers to support this, but I know in terms of the whole wellness and active, it's not just the cardio and then the strength, but in terms of the meditation piece, in terms of flexibility, yoga, Pilates. I know we're at the club that I belong to in Toronto. When I look at the growth in different types of yoga, and you look at who's in those classes, it is all people who are active agers.
Yeah.
The odd time they'll bring their kids along for the ride, but these are people who know that they need, the more flexible they can be, the more that their mind can meditate, take off stress, the better they sleep, all that kind of stuff comes into play. And then the other piece, and again, I think it's very state by state, but in Canada now that cannabis is legal, that whole area is taking off. I think the big opportunity, we're starting to see a little bit, but we're having discussions with a few players, is on there's kind of a line between the medical cannabis, but also kind of more the health and wellness. So whether that be for joint pains, whether it be to sleep better, anxiety. So I know that we're seeing a lot of older consumers, active agers, who used to be taking drugs in some cases for that stuff, or other types of medications, have now gone to more CBD than THC. And we're seeing amazing results. So that's really coming into play. Again, I'm not sure how much it's going to affect your members and their clients, and again, state by state, but that's coming in a hurry, and that's going to have an impact on in that industry.
Yeah, I definitely see that. So let's get a little bit more practical. The vast majority of our audience are trainers, some of who are good marketers, some of who are not, some of who, are, kind of hoping their next client comes from a referral. So give us a few tactics that our members could more effectively increase their reach and their target with these active aging consumers. Like, what are things they could do, to attract them more consistently, market to them a little bit better, without, in most cases, they don't have a big advertising budget.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. So I'll just mention a few things, and I'll talk more about this, I think, at the summit, but you have to think both kind of traditional, more online or offline stuff versus online. So, one of the big things that we see, and again, we've done research, is that, direct mail is still a really, really good driver of leads for people. And we know that 70% of active agers prefer direct mail over any other forms of outbound marketing. So I'll talk about language and imagery kind of, separate, I think, but direct mail, for example, is something that's key. Email, a lot of times we'll forget about email, but, if you have a list, great. If you don't have a list, you should start building a list and offering up, something of value to the people on your database, similar to what I would do to my business and what you're doing for your business, right? Personalized offers are very much appreciated by active aging consumers. So, in the fitness industry, whether it's come on in for a personal evaluation, something of value that's going to add to the experience that they're likely to pick up on them. Search engines are still being used a lot. And again, that's going to be more localized. So you have to think about kind of the type of words, AdWords you're spending money against. But also one of the key things that we're finding that I think is really applicable to your industry is reviews, and having online reviews, because it's a lot, when someone goes on to someone's site, a trainer site or a club site, and they can receive reviews of people that they can relate to, not a 35-year-old that we see a lot of times, people they can relate to, that goes a long way. And along with that are kind of having videos so people know what to expect if they're going to sign up with you, right? So having video of real people that you're training, who generally love to kind of get involved and help you out. A lot of times that works as well, kind of. So combining the video with online reviews. Again, you don't need a big budget to do that at all. It's just asking people to do some video. We shoot video here. It's not high. The phones now and then the cameras. You don't need a big budget to do that. So some real kind of simple stuff that doesn't take a lot of money. And then in terms of online, and I think most people are doing this, just in case, make sure that whatever you're doing is optimized for mobile phones, because that's how most people are getting their information now. So those are some more kind of practical things that I think be relevant to this group.
Yeah. I tell people all the time, I mean, if you've got a smartphone, you've got enough video technology. The key is that the sound is decent. In fact, if you go too high end, right, if you spend $10,000 trying to produce a professional video, you're almost seen as inauthentic these days, right? It's like, that's obviously a professionally produced piece, so you're selling me. So you got to be careful not to even make it too nice. So I shoot a lot of stuff with my iPhone or a flip cam, keep it simple. Just make sure the sound is good. So
Exactly.
Anything that trainers should be watching out for, things to avoid, common mistakes you see?
Yeah. So there's two things, and these both really, really bother me. One is the imagery that's being used. I've got a special project on the back burner that I'm working on, but when you look at the images that are out there for use, whether you go to, Shutterstock or, any of the big the photo libraries, Getty Images, there's hundreds of pictures, images of active seniors or active older people. They are brutal for the most part. Like when we were coming up with our branding, a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, our designers came with, some different options for the look and feel. And they said, we have to apologize because we cannot find any good imagery of who we're talking about with Active Agers. So all the time we're seeing, you go through magazines, through print ads, you go on websites, and firstly, you'll see the same type of images where it's generally a couple walking through a forest or on a beach. They've got their lab or their golden retriever with them. It's beautiful. The sun is it's dusk. The sun's going to be setting. It's not real. It's not authentic at all, right? And see, those are the types of visuals that you see. The worst are the lifestyle communities, because it's brutal, and they're all trying to say, oh, this is what it looks like. That's not what people want. They want to see kind of real people, which gets back to my point before about if you're going to show images on your site, use your own clients is the best way to do it.
Yeah.
Then you also see the same models are used in the same images. So within kind of the fitness area, there's probably 3 or 4 women, and we see them all the time being used. And one of these I have to do is kind of a collage of how they're all being used. All those same people are being used, and it drives me nuts. So imagery is one that it's just use real, authentic imagery. If you have to go out and shoot your stuff yourself, then do it. The quality isn't going to be as good, but it doesn't matter because people want to relate to that. They can't relate to bad imagery. The other, which is tied into it, is really about language. And that's both in terms of the messaging, and then we get asked all the time, well, what do you call these people? The kiss of death with active aging consumers is to call them something, to label them, because people generally don't want to be labeled, right? We don't recommend that our clients go out and call this group active aging consumers. That's just for us how we refer to them. But as soon as you start telling someone that this product or the service is for you because you're old, it's the kiss of death. And again, I go back to the Lifeline product, right? Where it's like, I've fallen, I can't get up. My mother, God love her, she's 88. And she did fall a couple of years ago. And I tried to convince her to use one of these at the age of 88. She says, no way am I wearing that. That would signify that I'm old. And then
Yeah. Right.
So I think you can't, to call someone a senior now, you can call someone a senior who's 85 or 90. They say, that's not me. That was my grandparents. I'm not a senior. So be very careful and cautious of trying not to label someone because that just turns them off. And then just in terms of the messaging and kind of the copy that you use, again, it should be aspirational, not because they're old. And again, this is for you because you're old. This is for you because it's going to make you feel better, look better, be better, all that kind of stuff. And if that message is for them, they'll tune in. If it isn't, I don't care what age, then they won't. So just those are the two kind of big call-outs for me.
Yeah, that's great. I couldn't agree more. I mean, I say all the time, we don't market fitness to 20 and 30-year-olds and call out to them like, hey, because you're young, this will appeal to you, or because you're a 20-something, we don't mention age in there, right? So people know their age, right?
Yeah.
We don't necessarily have to remind them of it or hit them in the face with it, So, and the term senior, even using an age number too, I tell people all the time, right? Like if you say a fitness program for people 55 plus, right? Like you're not going to sign up for that, right? Because you're like, oh, well, that's for my mom, right? So we always have to be careful. Like if you use the word senior, you're probably already aging your category up to 80 plus, right? Because someone in their early 70s is gonna be like, well, I'm not a senior, right? Or they might know they are, like legally, right? But they don't think of themselves that way. So they'll be like, oh, that might be a nice program for my mom or dad, right? So so we shoot ourselves in the foot, like you said.
And the other thing I'll add back to the imagery, and again, it ties into a different myth, but the myth is that if I have a visual of someone that's older, then it's going to turn off a younger crowd.
Right.
right? So when you see, I don't want to give you the examples of clients because it could embarrass them, but you'll see products or services that are, where it's definitely for an older consumer, yet the clothing companies are the worst. You look at someone like a Lululemon as an example, right? Or you look at, one of the big, other co-ops, whatever. And when you look at who's active out there, the shots of all people are like 30, 35 years old primarily. But they're buying their product, but they're missing this whole other group. But they're thinking, oh, people aspire to look younger, so I'm fine. It's actually, again, a bit of the reverse where someone who's younger doesn't mind looking at someone who's older who's
right,
who's sporting that outfit, whatever. But
right.
Again, that belief that you're going to upset people if you have older images, you're going to turn them off. Again, it's just not true.
Yeah. I mean, I say all the time, you're probably better off with a nice looking woman in her 50s, because she's not going to intimidate most women in their 30s or 40s, and women in their 60s think that's who they are, and women in their 70s, aren't intimidated, but you can do a lot better. And so yeah. it is important. Well, I want to open it up to questions for everyone else. I got one last question for you, and I want people to start typing in questions. We have 78 people on live, so that's great for a Tuesday afternoon. If they're anywhere near where we are, it's a good time to be indoors. So you recently hosted a webinar on CRO, or conversion rate optimization for active aging consumers. Can you elaborate a little bit on that, and then tell us what CRO is and how it applies to our industry?
Sure, and this was a new phrase for me. I actually partnered with a group, an agency in Portland called The Good, and they specialize in CRO, which means conversion rate optimization. So when you think about your website, most marketers, businesses spend most of their time focusing on how do I drive eyeballs and people to my website, right? So it's through search engine optimization, through buying AdWords, all that kind of stuff. And then you're measuring, and okay, I've got, I had 100 people or 1,000 people, whatever the number is, come to my site, great. That's fine. But if you're not converting them into leads or new customers or clients, you've wasted all that effort and energy. So conversion rate optimization is really about converting as many of those website visitors to prospects or clients as possible. And there's a whole art and science to doing it. I'm not an expert in the area. But the webinar we hosted was really CRO for active aging consumers. So anyone interested, they can go to our site and take a look at it. But there are a few things to consider. And again, I think we're going to have different levels of usage and expertise with your members in terms of websites. But it's anything. There's just more concern with active agers about security and privacy, just because we didn't grow up with it as much as young consumers. Again, I talk about the imagery and language, which again can be a turnoff to people. And then big one is kind of the whole user experience and navigation. Video, again, showing how what you offer is going to enhance people's lifestyles, concise information and reviews. Don't beat around the bush. Here's what you're going to get, and have reviews I talked about before. If you're looking for information from people, keep it real simple because they don't want to fill out a lot of forms. And then finally, customer service. If people want to have questions, they want to talk to you by phone. They don't want to have the chat, and that's just something. So if someone has a query, then best to get to them by phone. So those are just some of the key things that I just thought would be of interest potentially some of your group in terms.
Okay, and if folks want to check that out, they can go to your website and find that.
Absolutely.
Okay, awesome. All right, folks, it's time for your questions. Bridget actually has a really good one. Bridget says, when it comes to training older adults, many of the myths are closely held by older adults themselves, right? They buy into some of these myths. Research actually demonstrates this. She says, how does this influence our marketing, i.e., build it and they may not come if they believe they can't, right? Or it's not appropriate for them.
That's a great question. I see that all the time. It's a big societal question. And I think, we're kind of on the cusp of seeing a big change in society and trying to tackle ageism, but it is something, and I see it all the time. And I think it's just challenging people and people not being afraid to kind of say, hey, I'm older but I'm not like what you think I am. You know, I'll give you one example. I had a meeting with someone, some folks last week. This woman's in her 60s, and they're publishing a magazine directly focused on active aging consumers. So before we met, I went onto her LinkedIn site, and, you know, looking at her education, and it stopped at 1990, and it didn't have where she did, you know, when she finished her undergrad. So I kind of challenged her on that, and she said, she thought about it, she said, I kind of did that on purpose because I don't want people to know how old I am because they're going to apply these myths to me. So it's kind of a self-fulfilling thing. I don't have the answer. It's just, it's kind of a societal thing, and it's just challenging people. I challenge people all the time. I probably still say a few things, you know, I kind of forget things. So they say, oh, it's a senior moment. For me, the reality is I've had my whole life's been a senior moment because I always forget things anyway. But it's really, it's challenging people to move beyond that, and to calling people out when they're talking about ageism. And it's a tough thing to do. And you'll talk about people who are in the business who are marketing to active aging consumers, and they still have these beliefs and myths. And it's just, you know, that's why, you know, we're on a mission to do that, but it's a long road up.
Yeah, great. Man, we got people from all over. Got to give a shout out to Leanne from Sydney, Australia. That is awesome. This must be like 1 or 2 in the morning there, Sydney. That's great.
Yeah.
Tracy, I love this comment, so I got to share this. She says, I'm 55-year-old female, did modeling in my teens. If you come across something or info on how to get into modeling for health and wellness marketing, I would be open to it. So Tracy, I will shoot you an email and pass that along to Jeff as well. So she's actually.
I'll just make a quick comment on it, because we'll see, particularly in you'll see it in fashion, you'll see it in beauty. There are a few more women, but some men as well, who have done a great job at kind of getting a lot of the images you'll see out there. Like, you know, Helen Mirren, you see her for L'Oreal, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
I think there's a huge opportunity we do a lot of work with influencers. A lot of them tend to be younger from my other business, but I think there's a huge opportunity to have older influencers out there who marketers and businesses can look to and pay lots of money, who are going to reach other active aging consumers. So feel free to reach out. I know someone, the website address is ageofmajority.com.
Okay, great. Okay. Yeah, somebody asked your website address. If I don't want to use labels or terms or categories, how do I define my target market, for example, when I'm describing my business? Great question, Carl.
Yeah, and you know, kind of, it's a tough thing to do, because we feel as business people, we feel a need to say, hey, you're who I'm going after, and here's how I'm going to define you. I would really try to stay clear of trying to put a label on people. And I think I would structure your messaging and your images. We'll talk about images in a second, but I would structure your messaging so it's going to probably appeal more to someone who's kind of older and more active, without kind of saying this is for you because you're older and active, if that makes sense. So, hey, if you want to, you know, you want to be more flexible so that you can do, you know, so you can, you know, do things with your family. I don't know, you know, you might even want to mention grandchildren or children or whatever. It's really, think about more kind of how can you enhance what you're doing, how's it going to enhance their lifestyle. Forget about what age they're at, but also kind of, again, use imagery so that if you're someone who's 55, 65, 75, 85, whatever, they're going to see, wow, this person gets me, and they're going to help train me and kind of make me feel better as well. So it's a tough thing, but again, it's because we have this need as business people to label so that you know who you're targeting, but you really have to watch it with this group.
Yeah, I'll give you an example, Carl. So we did such a good job early on when we opened Miracles Fitness in 2007, you know, talking about how we're a fitness place for people over 50, and we specialize in fitness for people over 50, that we actually had people call. I mean, I kid you not, I remember phone calls, Jeff, people 48, 49 years old calling and saying, would you please let me join your fitness program? I know I'm not 50 yet. And I was like, you only have to be 18. You only have to be an adult. She's like, oh, I've seen all your marketing. So we quickly changed all of our marketing moving forward and changed everything that said 50 plus to 40 plus, right? Because it's like we really didn't want people in their 20s and 30s, but we certainly wanted people in their 40s and 50s. And I've actually had this conversation with another trainer who I've mentored, who put on her front window, you know, specialize in training for the 50 plus. And then people in their 50s are walking by her, right? And sometimes they even pop in and say, well, do you have any training for people my age, right? She's like, the window says for 50 plus. I said, you need to change that to 40 plus, right? Because someone in their 50s doesn't think they're 50 plus, right? They still think they're 45, So, so it's really important. If you do use a label, it's really important you tend to age it 10, 15 years younger. Typically, I say my market for Miracles Fitness, my studio here, the local business I run, my market's for women 55 to 65. I know that. I know that's who we market to. I know that's who we're about. But I don't necessarily tell them that, right? I don't necessarily put that label in what we put out, right? So it's so refreshing when a woman 62 years old comes in and she's like, I felt like you were actually offering a program for me. Are you actually looking for women in their 60s? And then I can say, yes, actually we specialize in that. And our average age client is 62. So you're going to fit right in here, right? Because they think, well, gee, am I going to be too old to join a fitness center? And so it's a great fit. So I love that. Yeah. Exactly. So the next question kind of ties into this. Deborah, I love this question. I'm curious to see how you're going to handle this, Jeff. So with certain certifications such as senior fitness specialist, how would you change that so you let your market know you are trained for that demographic, but without using a label such as senior?
That's a good question. I think there should be a movement to change the certification.
Great answer.
Yeah. I'm trying to think here. I don't know if it would be that bad, and I hope I'm not contradicting myself to say that you've been certified in training older people. I think I would try to de-emphasize the word senior, but and keep it more. I'm a specialist in training older consumers, and I actually have my certification as a senior fitness specialist. So I would I wouldn't start with that. I would kind of downplay it, if that makes sense. Because there are different needs. This is your business. I don't know it, but there are different needs for training older people and different things you have to do. So to me, that's the key thing that you have to let your clients know, that I know you're different than someone who's younger, who's 20 or 30 or whatever. I know that, and I'm actually been certified in that. So I can really help you, and the certification just happens to be called the senior fitness specialist.
You were extremely gracious, and I love your response. I'll be a little tougher. So I actually know a couple of major fitness companies that have put out the senior fitness specialist, and they put it out after we put out the functional aging specialist. And Cody and I actually sort of chuckled, because the reason we named our company the Functional Aging Institute, and the reason we named our certification the Functional Aging Specialist, is because we knew you had to run as far as you could from the term senior, right? And you can't market that. You don't want to put that out there. And so when I say Functional Aging Specialist to someone who's 58, first, they don't know what it is, right? So they're like, oh, tell me more about that. That's sort of intriguing, right? It's like, well, it's a special fitness certification that helps people train people every decade of their life, right? So as you move into your 40s, your 50s, your 60s, your 70s, and you want to be awesome in your 80s and 90s, right? So I've just removed the age thing, right? It's like, oh, well then, you can be in your 50s or 60s and train with me, right? I'm not just a senior trainer. And so that's, again, why language is so important. So if you are a senior fitness specialist, I'm not knocking their course. I happen to believe ours is better because it's based on more research, but I think you have to position it and change your language, right? Like, I have education, I have specialty knowledge, I have a certification that helps me train mature clients, right? Helps me deal with all the challenges that come in your 50s, 60s, 70s, so I can train you for great results. You don't have to use the term senior, because as soon as you say senior fitness specialist, someone in their 60s is going to go, well, I don't need that. I want, I want the regular trainer, so you got to be careful. So, which is why I think, again, it's a classic example of the fitness industry missing the mark, right? Even on how they labeled the certification, because they're misunderstanding, right? That there are you could be a senior and be 60, right? You could be 70 and not be a senior, right? I mean, it's very much how people view it, right? Like, I think my father-in-law, as soon as he turned 60 and he could get senior discounts, he was all about it, right? He's like, I can get a senior coffee at McDonald's, right? He embraced it, right? He's 80 now. He totally embraces being a senior. But I know a lot of my dad's 71 and doesn't embrace it, right? So it's very variable. So you got to be careful with that term for sure.
Yeah.
All right. Any other questions, folks? This has been great, Jeff. I love talking about this stuff, especially with fitness professionals, because I think I think like so many things, even we do this to millennials too, right? We make assumptions and stereotypes, and then we're making decisions based on that.
Yeah.
And it drives just so many mistakes. Well, I'm not seeing other questions come in. So I always like to do this because, we had over 70 people on live, but my hunch is we're going to have over 100 now watching the recording, and they're like, but I want to ask Jeff this. So if somebody wants to ask you a follow-up question, they're listening on the recording, what's the best way they can do that? Where do they go to get more information from you or reach out to your company?
Thanks. ageofmajority.com is our URL, our website, and Jeff at ageofmajority.com is the easiest way to reach me. Email, you can link in right off the website.
Okay.
And that's it. So there is one more question if we have time from Leanne. How do you convince boomers or active agers to part with their money for fitness? Well, firstly, you talked about the senior discounts. I did a whole blog. To me, one of the myths is don't forget your seniors discounts, because the reality is this group has more money than anyone else, right?
That's right. That's right.
Consumer spending and 70 to 80% of the wealth. So, they have the time and the money now. So how do you convince them? To me, it's about what are the lifestyle benefits they're going to have from that they're going to be able to get out of training and out of fitness and out of health and wellness, right? If they want to live to their fullest, as we're seeing more and more people want to do, then man, you've got to be active, because without being active, without your health, why bother, right? So it's just convincing people. It's like it's the functional and emotional benefits that you're going to get out of fitness and training, right? And how you're going to feel great, you're going to look great, all that kind of stuff. And then what does that mean you can do? Well, it means you can travel more places for a longer period of time. You can be more social. You can do this, if you're into golf, tennis, whatever, or you're going to be able to hang out with your family, with your friends, with your grandkids, your great grandkids. It's really linking it back to those benefits, because what else are they going to spend their money on that's going to allow them to do that stuff, right?
Yeah. Well, let me ask you this question, because I couldn't agree more with that. We talk a lot about one of the mistakes we make in marketing and selling fitness, especially to older adults, is we're fitness people, right? And we get excited about fitness and we geek out on equipment, and we're going to do this technique, or we're going to use this piece of equipment, and whatever you happen to do, right? And it can be Pilates, it can be yoga, it can be strength training, it can be CrossFit, it can be running on a treadmill, it can be spinning classes. I don't care what it is, right? We geek out on our fitness stuff, right? Yeah. And we think that that's what they want to buy, right? And I think we make a fundamental mistake, especially with people over 50. And Cody and I have been trying to teach this for about 5 years now. The big mistake we make is we're trying to market and sell fitness. And the reality is the mature client doesn't really care about fitness. They care about what fitness can do for them, right? And so if we would market and sell, like what you said, lifestyle, travel, independence, function, we can market the outcomes, right? I want to be healthy and independent, able to do whatever it is I want to do, right? I really don't care about what piece of equipment you use, right? Like, you're not selling me on a high-tech treadmill or a spinning bike or any of that sort of stuff, right? You're selling me on the outcomes. And so what's your thought on that? Because I tell people the mistake we make is we try to market and sell fitness, and then they don't part with their money. What we really should be marketing and selling is the outcomes of fitness, right? What fitness can do for you.
Absolutely. Because fitness and training is just a means to an end, right? So, and an interesting way to look at it might be, if you're starting with a new client, is, okay, what is it that you want to be able to do in the future, right? Is it, so if it's something that's going to take more endurance, if you want to go on, I did my bike trip in Majorca, and it's just one hill after another, right? So I need endurance, I need cardio, I need to train properly. So start with, what is it that's my goal that fitness is going to, and training is going to help me get to, right? So do I need flexibility to do more stuff? Do I need endurance? Do I need strength? What is that? Or is it a combination? So don't think about, what's the fitness I can sell you? What is it you want to do? And then structure the program to really help you do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's how we get people to part with their money, when they realize, I'm not just buying a fitness program, I'm buying something that's going to allow me to do all the stuff I want to do in life, right? Whether that's play lousy tennis or lousy golf or travel or whatever it is, it was so funny when I signed up a couple and they already told me we're playing pickleball 3 days a week. So I know they're getting exercise, right? Yeah. And they could have said to themselves, we're getting enough exercise. but they wanted to train so they could enjoy pickleball more, right?
Exactly.
That was their main motive. Is this going to help us move better, play pickleball without getting hurt, actually be more competitive, enjoy the game more? And I was like, absolutely it will, right? And of course, keep playing pickleball. Don't stop doing that. So
yeah, exactly.
So cool. Well, Jeff, thanks so much for coming on. Thanks so much for speaking at the Functional Aging Summit in Albuquerque, June 14th and 15th. We're really excited about that, and the National Senior Games there as well. My father's competing. I don't know if you're aware of that. So
yeah.
He's running the 50, the 100, the 200. I think he's doing the long and high jump as well. So
excellent. Good for him.
Yeah. So
great. Good.
Well, thanks so much.
Thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, everyone, for all your great questions. Have a great day.
Take care.